You cannot enter a new life carrying the same thoughts that created the old one. The old mindset will fight for its survival because it has become comfortable in limitation. It knows the language of fear. It knows the habits of doubt. It knows how to expect disappointment before blessings even arrive. And so many people pray for abundance while secretly preparing for failure. They ask for peace while continuing to entertain confusion. They desire victory while mentally rehearsing defeat every single day. The mind is a magnetic field. Whatever you continuously accept as truth becomes the atmosphere around your life. If you wake up every morning expecting struggle, the day obeys that expectation. If you constantly declare that opportunities never come to you, doors begin to close before you even reach them. Your words are not empty sounds. Your thoughts are not harmless whispers. They are commands. Life responds to the dominant belief hidden within your consciousness. The old mindset says, "Nothing ever changes for me." The new mindset says, "Everything is already moving into divine order." The old mindset waits for proof before believing. The new mindset believes first and then watches the evidence appear. This is why transformation cannot begin outside of you. A changed environment means nothing with an unchanged consciousness. You can move to a new city and still carry the same fear. You can earn more money and still feel poor. You can meet new people and still repeat old patterns because the mind recreates what it secretly expects. Most people are not trapped by circumstances. They are trapped by invisible assumptions. They have practiced limitation for so long that struggle feels natural. They have repeated negative thoughts so many times that those thoughts now sound like facts. But every condition in life first begins in the unseen world of belief. The moment you change your inner conversation, the outer picture begins rearranging itself to match. You were never meant to live as a prisoner of old thinking. The universe cannot pour new wine into old containers. If your mind is full of resentment, fear, jealousy, worry, and hopelessness, there is no room for higher things to enter. You must become mentally available for the life you are asking for. You must speak as the person you wish to become. You must think from victory instead of toward it. Stop introducing yourself to failure before success even arrives. Stop predicting delays. Stop worshiping obstacles with your attention. Every time you say, "I can't," the subconscious accepts it as instruction. Every time you repeat fearful stories, you energize them. The old mindset survives through repetition. It feeds on doubt and grows stronger through complaint. But the moment you refuse to agree with fear, its power begins to collapse. There are people who remain poor in spirit, even while surrounded by opportunity, because they never changed the inner image of themselves. And there are others who rise from impossible conditions because they dared to believe differently. The outer world always follows the inner blueprint. Life mirrors consciousness with perfect accuracy. You cannot win with the old mindset because the old mindset was designed for survival, not expansion. It was built from past disappointments, old wounds, inherited fears, and limiting beliefs collected over years. But your future requires a different frequency. It requires faith stronger than appearances. It requires the courage to expect good before it becomes visible. The moment you begin to think differently, you interrupt the old cycle. The moment you speak prosperity instead of lack, you shift energy. The moment you refuse to emotionally bow to fear, you reclaim power. Your destiny changes the instant your assumptions change, because the world outside has no choice but to echo the world within. The old mindset keeps people trapped inside invisible patterns they no longer question. Many wake up every day, expecting the same disappointments, the same delays, the same struggles, and then wonder why life never changes. But the mind moves like a silent law. Whatever is deeply accepted within begins to reproduce itself outwardly. A person who continuously expects rejection will unknowingly speak, act, and respond in ways that invite rejection. A person who believes life is difficult will notice obstacles more than opportunities. The outer world begins to echo the inner belief system with almost frightening accuracy. Most people do not realize they are living on mental autopilot. They repeat the same thoughts year after year until those thoughts harden into identity. They say things like, "This is just how my life is," or "Nothing ever works out for me." Without understanding, they are reinforcing the very condition they wish to escape. The subconscious mind accepts repetition as truth. It does not question whether the thought is helpful or harmful. It simply obeys the dominant message being impressed upon it daily. That is why the old mindset becomes dangerous. It convinces people that limitation is normal. It teaches them to expect less, dream smaller, and prepare for disappointment before anything even happens. The mind becomes trained to search for evidence that confirms fear. If one thing goes wrong, the old mindset quickly says, "See, I knew it." If an opportunity appears, it immediately searches for reasons it may fail. Even blessings are viewed through suspicion, because the old mindset trusts struggle more than success. A person may desire abundance, but if their inner language is constantly filled with lack, worry, and fear, they continue creating the same reality. The mind cannot move toward prosperity while emotionally attached to poverty thinking. Complaining about bills, expecting failure, envying others, and speaking negatively about money keeps the consciousness fixed on limitation. What is held in attention grows stronger. The old mindset survives because it is constantly fed through repetition. Many people believe circumstances create thoughts, but thoughts often create circumstances. The inner picture acts like a blueprint that life continuously follows. If someone secretly believes they are unworthy of happiness, they may sabotage healthy relationships without realizing it. If they believe success belongs only to others, they unconsciously avoid risks that could change their future. The old mindset does not simply observe reality, it participates in creating it. Fear also keeps the old mindset alive. Fear tells people it is safer to remain familiar than to change. Even painful patterns can become comfortable when repeated long enough. Some people stay connected to old failures because those failures have become part of their identity. They introduce themselves through past pain, old disappointments, and previous mistakes. Instead of expecting miracles, they rehearse memories of defeat. Instead of imagining expansion, they relive old wounds over and over again. The mind is like soil. Whatever is planted repeatedly begins to grow. If seeds of fear, doubt, anger, and limitation are planted daily, those conditions eventually appear in life experiences. The old mindset waters negative expectations until they become visible realities. It creates emotional habits that feel natural simply because they have been practiced for years. Worry becomes normal, doubt becomes normal, struggle becomes normal. The person stops questioning the pattern because it has existed for so long. This is why external change alone rarely transforms a life. A person can move to a new environment and still recreate the same problems because the inner blueprint remains unchanged. They may earn more money, yet continue living with anxiety and scarcity thinking. They may enter new relationships while carrying the same emotional fears. The old mindset rebuilds familiar realities wherever it goes, because consciousness always seeks to express what it believes most deeply. The greatest prison is not outside conditions, but unconscious agreement with limitation. Once the mind accepts something as permanent, life begins arranging itself around that belief. The old mindset repeats the same reality because it keeps repeating the same thoughts, the same emotional reactions, the same fearful assumptions, and the same expectations every single day. Your thoughts are not powerless ideas floating through the mind without consequence. Every thought carries energy, direction, and influence. The atmosphere surrounding your life is constantly being shaped by the dominant beliefs you entertain each day. People often focus only on visible actions, while ignoring the invisible mental patterns creating those actions. Yet the mind moves first. Thoughts become feelings. Feelings shape behavior. Behavior creates habits, and habits eventually produce circumstances. What repeats within eventually appears outside. Many people unknowingly live in atmospheres of fear, because fear has become their most practiced thought. They wake up already expecting problems before the day even begins. They assume delays, prepare for disappointment, and mentally rehearse negative outcomes so often that anxiety becomes familiar. The mind then projects that emotional energy into daily life. Conversations become tense, opportunities feel threatening, and even small obstacles appear overwhelming because the inner atmosphere is already heavy with expectation of struggle. Thought is creative in nature. The subconscious mind absorbs repeated ideas and begins organizing behavior and perception around them. A person who constantly says, "Nothing ever works for me," starts noticing evidence that supports the statement while ignoring evidence that contradicts it. Their awareness becomes selective. They focus on failure more than possibility. They remember rejection more than success. The atmosphere around them begins to feel closed, restricted, and hopeless, because their thinking has trained them to see life through limitation. On the other hand, a person who expects good begins to create a different atmosphere entirely. They walk differently, speak differently, and respond differently because the inner assumption has changed. They become calmer in uncertainty because they believe things are moving in their favor even when results are not yet visible. Faith alters emotional energy. Confidence changes perception. Gratitude softens fear. The atmosphere around such a person begins attracting cooperation, opportunities, and peace, because their thoughts no longer feed confusion and negativity. The world responds strongly to emotional expectation. If a person constantly anticipates betrayal, they may become defensive and suspicious in relationships. That energy creates tension, which then damages the very connections they hope to protect. If someone expects financial struggle, they may operate from panic instead of wisdom, making fearful decisions that reinforce scarcity. Thoughts silently influence choices, reactions, posture, tone, and behavior, until life starts mirroring the inner condition. Words strengthen the atmosphere created by thought. Spoken language acts like a declaration of belief. Every time someone says, "I am always unlucky," or "life is against me," the subconscious records the statement as instruction. Repeated negative language becomes emotional conditioning. Over time, the person begins emotionally living inside the reality they continuously describe. The atmosphere around them feels drained because the mind is constantly reinforcing defeat. This is why guarding the mind is essential. Not every thought deserves agreement. Many thoughts are inherited from past experiences, family conditioning, social fear, or painful memories. Some people have carried limiting beliefs since childhood without ever questioning them. They were taught to expect lack, fear success, distrust happiness, or settle for less. Those beliefs quietly shaped the atmosphere of their lives for years. The mind accepted them as truth, simply because they were repeated often enough. A negative atmosphere can exist even in beautiful surroundings. Someone may possess money, relationships, or opportunities, and still feel trapped internally because their thoughts remain fearful and conflicted. Another person may have little externally yet carry peace and expectation within, creating an atmosphere of hope that gradually transforms their conditions. External circumstances alone do not define the quality of life. Inner consciousness determines whether the atmosphere becomes heavy with fear or alive with possibility. Thoughts also affect the people around you. Energy is contagious. A person filled with bitterness, worry, and constant complaint spreads heaviness into conversations and environments. Others feel drained without fully understanding why. In contrast, someone who carries faith, peace, and expectation often uplifts entire rooms simply through their presence. Their atmosphere reflects the thoughts they consistently nurture within themselves. The mind is continuously broadcasting signals through emotion, expectation, and belief. Whatever dominates your thinking eventually colors your world. If fear dominates, life begins feeling unsafe and restrictive. If gratitude dominates, life begins revealing hidden blessings. If confidence dominates, opportunities appear more visible. The atmosphere of your life is not formed by chance. It is shaped daily by the thoughts you repeatedly entertain, accept, and emotionally empower. Fear has stopped more dreams than failure ever could. Long before opportunities disappear, fear convinces people they are not capable, not ready, or not worthy enough to receive what they desire. It speaks in quiet thoughts that seem reasonable at first. It says, "What if nothing changes? What if you fail? What if people judge you?" Over time, these thoughts become mental chains that hold people in the same place for years. Many are not defeated by circumstances. They are defeated by believing fearful thoughts. More than they believe in possibility, faith operates in the opposite direction. Fear expects the worst before it happens, while faith expects good before there is visible proof. Fear studies obstacles, but faith studies possibilities. Fear magnifies delays and mistakes until they feel permanent. Faith understands that temporary conditions do not decide final outcomes. A person cannot move powerfully towards success while emotionally bowing to fear every day. The inner atmosphere must change first. Confidence must replace doubt. Expectation must replace anxiety. Most people wait for evidence before believing life can improve. They tell themselves they will become confident after success arrives, peaceful after problems disappear, or hopeful after circumstances change. But transformation rarely works that way. The mind must move first. Faith creates the inner condition that allows new realities to appear. A person who constantly fears loss unconsciously blocks themselves from fully receiving blessings because they are mentally preparing for disaster instead of expansion. Fear has a way of disguising itself as logic. It tells people they are simply being realistic when they lower their expectations. It convinces them that dreaming big will only lead to disappointment. Many stop themselves before life even has the chance to respond. They reject opportunities in their minds before they ever appear externally. They assume rejection before applying. They assume failure before beginning. They assume struggle before progress. Fear becomes a self-fulfilling force because whatever the mind continually expects begins influencing actions and decisions. Faith is not blind denial of difficulty. It is the decision to believe something greater is possible despite appearances. A person operating in faith may still face uncertainty, but they refuse to let uncertainty become their master. They understand that conditions can change quickly when consciousness changes. They stop worshiping obstacles with constant attention. Instead of feeding fear through endless worry, they begin feeding expectation through belief and inner conviction. The subconscious mind responds strongly to emotional repetition. If someone constantly imagines failure, they emotionally condition themselves for defeat. Their body reacts with hesitation, tension, and insecurity. They speak timidly, avoid risks and miss opportunities, because fear has already convinced them the outcome will be negative. But when faith enters the mind, behavior changes naturally, confidence increases, creativity expands, courage grows stronger, possibilities become visible because the inner lens has shifted. Many people unknowingly pray for success while emotionally living in fear. They ask for abundance but continuously worry about lack. They desire peace but constantly rehearse worst-case scenarios in their imagination. The mind cannot fully move toward prosperity while remaining attached to fear-based thinking. Fear divides energy. It creates inner conflict. One part of the mind desires growth while another part expects disappointment. This confusion weakens action and delays progress. Faith creates mental unity. It aligns thought, expectation, emotion, and action toward possibility instead of defeat. A person filled with faith speaks differently about their future. They stop declaring limitation over themselves. They stop introducing fear into every conversation. They begin expecting doors to open, solutions to appear, and opportunities to arrive. This expectation changes the emotional atmosphere around them. Life begins responding differently because their consciousness is no longer centered in defeat. Fear also keeps people emotionally tied to the past. Old failures become mental evidence that future attempts will fail as well. Many relive painful memories so often that they unconsciously carry them into every new experience. Faith breaks this cycle by refusing to let yesterday define tomorrow. It understands that no condition is permanent unless the mind keeps recreating it through belief. Successes is never created only through external effort. Inner expectation matters deeply. Two people may face the same opportunity, but the one ruled by fear often hesitates, while the one filled with faith moves forward boldly. Fear sees risk everywhere. Faith sees potential everywhere. Fear waits for guarantees that may never come. Faith moves with trust before certainty appears. The future begins changing the moment. Faith becomes stronger than fear within the mind. A new life cannot grow from an old inner conversation. Many people desire transformation while secretly speaking the same limiting words over themselves every single day. They ask for abundance but continue saying, "I never have enough." They want peace but constantly repeat fearful thoughts. They pray for success while describing themselves as unlucky, stuck, or incapable. The outer world listens closely to the language repeated within the mind. What a person continuously declares eventually shapes identity, emotion, behavior, and experience. The inner conversation is powerful because it never truly stops. Even in silence, the mind is speaking. It comments on circumstances, predicts outcomes, judges situations, and forms expectations. Most people are not fully aware of this hidden dialogue because it has become automatic over the years. They have repeated the same thoughts so often that those thoughts now feel natural and true. But familiarity does not make a thought accurate. A fearful inner conversation can exist for years simply because it has been practiced repeatedly. Many people unconsciously use language that keeps them emotionally connected to limitation. They say things like, "Nothing works for me," "I'm always behind," "Life is hard," or "People like me never succeed." These statements may seem harmless in the moment, but the subconscious mind absorbs them deeply. Repeated words become internal commands. The mind begins organizing behavior and perception around whatever is consistently spoken and believed. A person who constantly describes themselves as weak eventually acts weak. A person who continually expects rejection behaves as though rejection is inevitable. The inner conversation silently directs emotional energy. It shapes confidence, expectation, and self-image. Over time, life starts reflecting the story the mind keeps repeating. This is why some people remain trapped in the same emotional and financial conditions even after external opportunities appear. Their inner language keeps pulling them back into old patterns. To create a new life, the inner dialogue must change first. New conditions require new assumptions. A person cannot continuously speak defeat while expecting victory to appear. The mind must begin agreeing with possibility instead of limitation. This does not mean ignoring challenges. It means refusing to let challenges become permanent mental identities. Difficult moments should never become lifelong declarations. The old inner conversation is usually built from past experiences, disappointments, and inherited beliefs. Some people grew up hearing fear-based language constantly repeated around them. They learned to expect struggle before they ever experienced freedom. Others developed negative inner dialogue after painful failures or rejection. Over time, those experiences became mental scripts, replaying automatically in daily life. The mind began speaking from memory instead of possibility. Changing the inner conversation requires awareness. A person must begin noticing how often they mentally speak against themselves. Many criticize themselves more harshly than anyone else ever could. They magnify mistakes, predict failure, and question their worth constantly. This creates emotional heaviness that affects every area of life. Confidence weakens because the mind is continuously attacking itself from within. The moment the inner conversation changes, emotional energy begins shifting. Instead of saying, "Nothing will ever improve," the mind begins declaring, "Things are moving into order." Instead of expecting defeat, it begins expecting guidance, opportunity, and growth. These shifts may seem small at first, but repetition gives them power. The subconscious mind responds to dominant emotional language. Whatever is repeated with feeling begins shaping reality from the inside outward. People often underestimate how much words influence atmosphere. Negative inner speech creates tension, fear, and hopelessness. Positive inner speech creates openness, confidence, and expectation. A person who speaks peace internally begins carrying peace externally. A person who mentally rehearses success begins behaving differently in daily situations. The inner world changes posture, tone, reactions, and choices long before visible results appear. The new inner conversation also requires releasing attachment to old identity. Some people continue introducing themselves through past pain. They define themselves by previous mistakes, failures, betrayals, or losses. Their inner dialogue keeps reopening old wounds until suffering becomes familiar. But a new life demands a new self-image. The mind must stop bowing to old stories and begin accepting greater possibilities. The subconscious does not argue with repeated belief. It accepts what is consistently impressed upon it. If fear is repeated daily, fear becomes reality. If confidence is repeated daily, confidence begins expanding. The mind responds to dominant emotional instruction with remarkable obedience. This is why the inner conversation must become intentional instead of automatic. Every new reality begins as an unseen thought, before it becomes visible experience. The words spoken within shape the atmosphere surrounding the future. A changed life always begins with a changed inner voice, speaking differently about possibility, identity, success, and expectation.